Okay, as I said, welcome to our um, NYSSCA webinar series. Tonight's special event is Growing Healthy Black Men. John Nuasso from Georgia is going to be our speaker. We have to put this um, slide up. This is all NYSSCA owns the property, and you're not allowed to reproduce or reproduce any trademarks and so on. Okay, okay. John is going to be our presenter this evening. He's a human developer who inspires, relates, and leverages the power of school counseling to help students and communities. He grew up in Austell, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. He's a product of a Nigerian and African American family with lots of love, support, and high expectations. After years of chronic underachievement caused by stress, anxiety, and depression, he graduated from Georgia Southern University with that and a degree in chemistry. Don is the ASCA 2024 Georgia School Counselor of the Year, and most importantly, he's a middle school counselor in one of the largest school districts in the nation. And he shows scholars how to show up, grow up, blow up, and slow up better. He's a licensed mental health counselor, national speaker, and trainer, and the founder of Think Diff. He currently lives in Metro Atlanta with his beautiful and amazing wife, Chanel, and their children, John and Amara. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the screen over to John, who's going to give us lots of information this evening.
Right. I'm excited to be here with you all tonight. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up. Cool. Let's do it. So, this is Growing Healthy Black Men. And just before we dive into it, I think, it's really important to connect. I mean, that's the root of the work that we do is connecting with others, building relationships. And so, just a little bit about me. You already heard my introduction. I've done work at different levels at the local, state, and national level in terms of our profession. And some of the things that you will not know about me is that I really enjoy Inside Out. Two, Invincible is not on this list, on my now watching list, but I just started that. I'm big on fantasy football, won one of my leagues this year. Shout out to anyone else that is also a league winner or enjoys playing the game. Some of the other things that are booming in my house right now, Gracie's Corner, Paw Patrol, Gabby's Dollhouse. And then, of course, look, the Super Bowl was the other day. I know we probably got some Giants fans in the audience. Let's go ahead and break the ice now. Look, I had to choose between the Eagles and KC, and I'm glad that Jalen got a ring, and I'm glad Saquon got a ring. And I'm sorry if for any other any Giants fans in the audience, I'm sorry. Um, but also congratulations if you were rooting for them too. So about my community, as you can see, I do not do work in isolation, whether it's personal work, family work, professional work. My community is a big part of that, and I hope that's the same for you. And so I just want to shout out the people in this picture, but especially my wife and my two children, John and Amara, which are in that center pick. And then of course my parents and my mother-in-law. We would not be able to do the things that we have done and continue to do without their support, without their guidance. And we appreciate them. I believe that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Our ancestors and those who came before us made it possible for us to be here and guide us. And so I have to show love to those people who serve as my support network. So without any further ado, let's start with a little check-in. Go to menti.com and use the code 67013847. All right, 67013847. And so when you get there, let us know that you made it safely. Go ahead and let us know that you made it safely. Here is so again, that code is 67013847. So just a quick check-in. Cool. We got some people. Wonderful. All right. So this is my mood meter tool. When we talk about growing healthy black men start out as boys, and boys are human beings. And so one of the most important things is humanizing them and recognizing that the same needs that most humans have, so too do black boys. In addition to that, there are unique needs that we have as black boys and men. And those unique needs overlap with universal needs that we all need as human beings. So one of those needs is absolutely social and emotional well-being. And so this is a great tool. This pulls from the work of Mark Brackett at the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence. This is the mood meter, or it's adapted from the mood meter. And this is a great tool that I use with both my students and adults. And so as you can see, it's a very quick way to just see where people are. It looks like we have a lot of higher energy, higher pleasant folks in the audience. And the important thing that I say to my students is, however you're feeling, it's okay. That is feedback. That is your body in conjunction with your mind and your spirit providing feedback about what is going on as you interact with your environment, right? Now, however you feel is how you feel. Now, what you do based on how you feel can be a problem. All right. And so I like to start off here because it lets me know where people are. And it's a very quick check-in tool. So, y'all, what is required to become a successful adult? That's what I'm curious. I'm curious about what you all think is required to become a successful adult. All right, no wrong answers. No wrong answers. And for anyone that wants to either type in the chat or come off mute, I invite that as well. Support that you trust. Okay. Thank you, Jacqueline. We got character, a safe support network, discipline. I'm with it. I'm with it. Passion and drive, respect oneself, set goals, patience, self-recognition, support. Okay. Emotional intelligence, empathy, love, respect, sense of humor, determination. All right. Thank you all. Okay. All right. All right. Are you all able to see my PowerPoint right now? Yes. Okay. Excellent. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So thank you all for providing that information. What I want us to understand is that when we talk about supporting students and really supporting anyone, it really starts with understanding that there is a relationship between the individual and their environment. And whatever aspirations we're talking about, whatever it is, there has to be a connection with real life, right? Whatever the context is that we exist within has to be acknowledged. So whether it's positive or negative, whether it's something that makes us happy or sad when we think about it, whether it's harmful or helpful, the reality is that dreams start in real life. And so I want us just real quick, type in the chat or come off mute. Who was it that quoted this? Who said this? We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. Who can be credited with this quote? Who do y'all think? Frederick Douglass. That's a great guess, but that is not the correct guess. Me hear from like one or two more people. George Wallace. Okay. That's another good guess, but no. Martin Luther King, question mark. You asking me, are you telling me? The correct answer is absolutely Martin Luther King. Shout out to Lisa. That is correct. You were telling us. You didn't even know you knew the answer, but you knew it. And what's so powerful about this is everyone knows the I have a dream speech, or everyone has interacted with it. Someone has quoted it in their life, even if they haven't heard the actual speech. they've been connected to it in some way. I'm confident in making that bet, right? But the I have the dream speech, the I have a dream speech, the I have a dream part was at the very end of the speech, right? When he started talking about the vision and the possibilities, he had already spent 3/5 of that speech connecting with the reality and empathizing with the pain that Black Americans were experiencing and what harsh realities they were facing at that time. He wasn't being negative simply to be negative, and he wasn't being positive simply to be positive. He was connecting with the reality so that he could then help people explore what a dream would look like. And so, as we are in Black History Month, and as we are human developers, and as we are called to think diff, it's important that we understand the importance of IRL. So, not just understanding that wherever we start, we have to make sure we're acknowledging things in real life for our students, for our school community, for ourselves. We also have to inspire, relate, and leverage if we want to help people navigate complex systems. All right. And so when I talk about complexity, I mean things and situations where you could tell two different people the same thing and it could work for one person, but not the next. And you could say the same thing on a different day and it may not work for either person, or it might work for both. Complex situations don't often have simple solutions. And so for those, we have to make sure that people, one, are inspired. So we want to fill someone with the urge or ability to do something, whether it is intrinsic or extrinsic motivation, whether it is them modeling their behaviors after yours, whether it's them internalizing your voice so that they can push through difficult times or so that they can figure out challenges in their life. Inspiring has to be a part of the work that we do as human developers. We also have to use knowledge of relationships between individuals and within ecosystems. We have to relate. We have to understand how people connect with other people, other things, and their environment. We have to understand how systems work and how they work at different levels. Individuals versus small groups versus institutions and versus structures. All right. We have to relate as well. And ultimately, if we can inspire and relate, we can leverage the power of in this case, our comprehensive school counseling program. And when we talk about leverage, it's the power to influence a person or a situation to achieve a particular outcome. And we leverage relationships all the time, right? We leverage the power of interacting with people and coordinating people and collaborating with people and empowering people to create better outcomes for people, for humans. That's why we are human developers. And we do this in ecosystems. So we're not just people. There's no such thing as a person without a place. When you go outside, if it's hot, it's going to impact how you show up in the world. If it's cold, it's going to impact your behavior. It's going to shape your interactions. Do y'all know? I don't know about your school. I know in my school, you can tell a difference in behavior if it's raining outside versus if it's a very hot day versus if it's a full moon. Like I know I'm not alone. Do y'all have full moon days? Where yeah, y'all know what I'm talking about. And so it's important for us to acknowledge that people are just not individuals in isolation. People in places perform power. There is a dynamic, there is a hierarchy, there is an authority figure in most cases. Even if that, in every case, even if you are the authority person, if you're in your room by yourself, you still have scripts. You still have social expectations that you've internalized that shape the way you behave and interact with yourself, right? And so we do this to problem solve in periods of time. We're typically trying to solve some type of challenge that we're experiencing and navigating. And depending on what time of the year or what time in our lives or what is going on outside of us during different time periods, all of that shapes our outcomes. All of that shapes our interactions. And so it's important for us to understand that if we want to improve outcomes in a complex ecosystem. All right. So that IRL, all right, in real life, inspire, relay, leverage. Right? And so what y'all will notice is that if you, on this screen, you see these concentric circles, and some of you might be thinking, what does that have to do with relating? Well, there's research that really speaks to having a comprehensive focus with an ecological lens. So I pulled this word from the multicultural and social justice counseling competencies. And if our goal is to be ethical counselors or effective counselors, we have to be equitable. It's in our standards. This is pulled directly from the body of work that guides what a school counselor should be doing, how we should be showing up. All right. And so a lot of times we are so passionate. Like either raise your hand, you can put a 1 in the chat, or you can give me a thumbs up if you care. Like if you care, if it's important to you to help people, and that's at least part of why you are in this profession, throw a 1 in the chat, give me a thumbs up or a hand clap. You can even come off mute and just say me, right? But if that's you, just show me some feedback. Do you care? Is it important to you to help people? Is that part of why you are in this profession? All right, cool. I got a few ones. Okay. And I know it's true. It might not be the only motivation. Like, I like getting a paycheck and I have mouths to feed. I have a family to support. But there are lots of different ways I could be funding my life. But part of the reason that I was attracted to this is because I care about helping people. All right. And so people who care, school counselors especially, often set up to do something, right? We want to take action. We want to make life better for people. And the reality is that if we just set out to do things without doing the work prior, then we can often either be ineffective or have a neutral outcome or even harm people. So, what this theory suggests, or what this framework suggests, is that before we start talking about counseling and advocacy interventions, we first need to establish a healthy counseling relationship. Before we can do that, we have to make sure that we understand to the best extent that we can the client worldview, and not from the idea of I'm looking at this client and so I understand why they move. No, our goal, like, yes, that is helpful, but our goal is to be able to understand the client's worldview from inside of them as much as possible. So we need to understand their ecosystem to help understand how they're influenced by it and why they make decisions that they make. All right. So not only that, we have to make sure that we are aware of our own counselor awareness, right? We have to have awareness around some of the things I talked about prior, as well as our own stuff, because we all have stuff. We all were raised in a society and we all were raised in a community. We all were raised in a household that taught us different things. And some of those things were biases, right? And some of those things were gifts, they were strengths, they were skills. But it's important for us to know both our strengths and our challenges, as well as our biases, whether they're positive and negative, so that we can better support our clients or our students. And in order to really, really be effective, at the root of it, we have to understand multicultural and social justice practice, because our country has a legacy of various forms of discrimination at the systemic level. Whether we're talking about race, and we have a society that's still heavily organized around race, whether we like to admit it or not, and it impacts us in ways that we often do not fully understand or do not realize. Whether we're talking about race, gender, class, sexual orientation, we could be talking about socioeconomic status. We could be talking about ability. We could be talking about first language, right? All of these things shape the way that we work together. All right. And so it's important for us to acknowledge all of this and also speak to intersectionality, power privilege, and center social justice in the work that we do. It shouldn't be something that's on the outskirts of what we do. It should be central. And ultimately, if we do that, we can take effective action. All right. So when we talk about supporting our students who are human beings, and when we especially talk about historically marginalized groups and often presently marginalized groups, it's important for us to explore pathways, endangerments, and identity and how those things work together. And so I love this slide because there's an idea of what success looks like. And a lot of times we think it's a lot easier to get there, but what it actually looks like is more complex. Right. So what we know what also is accurate is usually the pathway to get from where you are to whatever your aspiration is clearer and has fewer risks if you are affluent, white, and or male. And regardless, if you have adverse childhood experiences, usually your pathway is more complicated. You experience more challenges and you experience overall more stressors in your life that make it difficult for you to do things that should be simple in theory, right? So what I want us to notice is that for most people, you still have to do some work. You still have to learn how to ride a bike. You probably have to fall off and scrape your elbow or something, right? You're probably going to experience some pain for most people in most cases, right? So I'm not saying that, oh, you're white and rich. Life is incredibly easy for you, or like, yeah, relatively speaking, but everybody has to do some work. But relative to what life can look like, if you have experienced adverse childhood experiences like childhood abuse or sexual abuse or an incarcerated parent or adultification, which is a big one, or discrimination of some kind, then chances are you're going to be experiencing stress that makes it more difficult for you to do things that you aspire to do. And it's important for us to acknowledge that. So when we talk about what aspirations look like, there is a book. Well, first of all, real quick about adverse childhood experiences. Kaiser Permanente and the CDC did a study back in the 90s. Many of you have probably heard of it or at least been exposed to it. But the biggest thing about adverse childhood experiences that is that from that study, they talked to lots of different people who were having various health outcomes, those who were experiencing sicknesses, health like relative sickness like diabetes or heart disease or things of this nature. They asked them about what types of things they went through in childhood, and they realized that there was a significant correlation between people who had complicated health outcomes as adults and experienced certain things through childhood, some of the things that I just mentioned. So now there's more than enough research to know that there is a link between what people go through as young folks and how that shapes the rest of their life. That data is out there. I'm not here to litigate that. And if you want that research, I'll be happy to share it with you. But it is out there. All right. There is also research on what essential elements of well-being are. And so there's actually a book by that title, Five Essential Elements of Well-Being. And across cultures, they talk to a lot of people. They talk to them to figure out what it is they value in their community. And what they found is that community well-being, financial well-being, social well-being, physical well-being, and career well-being were five things that consistently happen across many different cultures. And so having well-being in each of these areas is really important. Having well-being in all five of those areas creates a sense of thriving that very few people actually experience. And so in order to get from where we are to where we one day want to be, to experience various forms of well-being that are essential, we got to do some work. And that work looks different depending on how you show up and how the world treats you. So we have to think differently. We have to consider our causes, effects, and outcomes. And we have to consider that they emerge. They're not always there, right? I know some people believe in predestination. And some folks believe that you have the power to create everything that happens in your life. And the reality is that there's interplay between those two things, right? And what we tend to think is if there's an individual, they make choices. And those choices will, if they're good, then they lead to positive life outcomes, like well-being in all those areas. But if they make bad choices, then it leads to disease, disability, social problems, and or early death, ultimately. All right. And a lot of times we think that it's solely the person's fault or their success is due to what they did, their hard work alone. And yeah, in reality, it's more complex than that because it's not just the decisions that you make, it's also your biology, the genes that you have and how they're expressed. My genes coded in a way that made me come up as dark brown. You code me as a black person, and that absolutely shapes the way that we interact. Same thing with my gender, right? And the more we learn about genes and epigenetics, we are learning that we literally pass down experiences through our DNA and through our RNA and through our epigenetics. And depending on what experiences we have in our social environment, some parts of our genes are turned on or turned off. And so all these things work together. What's going on around us and what types of relationships we have as we are navigating life. So in the center of this, you see this question mark that represents uncertainty because the reality is that we don't know how things are going to play out. There are students, I'm sure you have students from the quote unquote best families, right, who are struggling more than you would expect if you looked at their profile on paper. You probably have students from the quote unquote worst families who are thriving. They're finding a way to get the best grades and perform the best in extracurricular activities and develop the greatest relationships, right? So really, this is more uncertain than we like to think. And what we do know is that the more exposure you have to opportunities, the more likely the more likely you are to experience well-being in life. And the more you are exposed to endangerments like adverse childhood experiences, the more likely you are to experience disrupted neurodevelopment, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, meaning that there are some things we're expecting our students to be able to do who have been through trauma and are still experiencing trauma that they literally cannot do. They physically may have missed certain developmental milestones, or they may be in such a state of survival that they literally cannot do it. And so, again, if you're in a space where you're expected to do things and you're often punished for things that you cannot do, then of course you're going to adopt health risk behaviors. How many of you have students that self-medicate? They're in middle school, they may even be in elementary school, and you already see their eyes come to school cloudy. Or they come to school and you can tell that something's a little off, right? I just think here it's important to understand that 4 or more adverse childhood experiences are correlated with disease, disability, social problems, and early death. So the big thing here is that even if you experience adverse childhood experiences, if you have supportive, buffering relationships, and if you have hope and healing, then you can experience well-being. None of this stuff is predestined. There are likelihoods, there are odds, but if you have the right supports in place, no matter what you've been through, there can be a pathway for you to experience well-being. And that's what we are here for as human developers. So when we talk about hope, do me a favor and just throw 1 in the chat if you have heard of hope science. We often talk about hope. We often talk about hope like, hey, I hope you have a nice day. We treat it like a wish, like we don't really have power over it. But if you're familiar with hope science, with the belief that the world can be better and you have the power to make it so, throw 1 in the chat. If you've never heard of it, put a 0 in the chat. So hope science talks about 3 parts. 1 is goals, 2 is pathways, and 3 is agency, the belief that you can do something. And so, 1, are there goals that your students have, especially your Black boys? And if they do have those goals, do we have conversations about pathways to achieving them? Because healthy aspirations is one thing, right? Even if they want to do something that's not quote unquote healthy, our role in figuring out what a pathway to achieving that thing is can be therapeutic. And it may be a long, drawn out series of conversations, But hey, having a real conversation about, oh, you want to do that? Okay, well, what does that look like? Right? What are the pros and cons of that if you choose to go that route? Holding space for non-judgment long enough to be able to really process with them what certain things they want to do mean is super important. And then helping them connect with pathways that are healthy, that you both agree on, or that you at least can get behind if there's something that's important too, is really important. And the third piece is the agency. Do they believe that they can do it? If they put forth the effort, can they learn what they need to learn? Can they apply what they need to apply to put themselves where it is that they want to be? Goals, pathways, and agency. There's a book called Hope Rising by Dr. Chan Hellman out of the University of Oklahoma or Oklahoma University. Super helpful, highly recommended. But when we talk about getting folks who have experienced complex trauma and still are experiencing it, Black folks have to fit in that category. All right. And it's important for us to notice that it's not just who you are and how you show up. It's who came before you. So your family, social group, and communities impact how you are. Generational embodiment, meaning again, the stuff that we carry and pass along from generation to generation, and historical trauma, again, shapes the way that we show up in the world. All right. And so really, if we want to be effective human developers, if we want to be effective school counselors, we have to understand that teaching kids about culture and race in a restorative way, not you are bad because you are Black, but hey, Black is beautiful. You are a human being. There are people who are Black who do things that are not good. There are people who are Black who do things that are great, right? What does that have to do with you? And also, through no fault of your own, some people are going to mistreat you just because you are Black. How are you going to move through the world like that? How can I support you as you go through that complexity? And on top of that, because you are Black and a man, there is a unique form of racial discrimination that you will experience because people will treat you as a threat because you are a man and because you are Black in a different way than they would if you were a Black woman, a Black queer person, a Black trans person, right? Black non-binary, all of these people who are Black, who also can fit into the category of Black boy at various points in time, depending on how they identify, will be treated differently. And so it's up to us to be able to help them navigate their cultural identity and how the environment impacts them and how they impact their environment. We also need to help them understand agency. Like I said before, we need to have transformative relationships with these people, right? With our young Black men. And we need to help them create meaning. We need to be a part of their meaning making process. And we need to help affirm their aspirations and help them identify pathways to aspirations. Dr. Sean Genwright came up with the karma theory for and really his work is around healing centered engagement. We talk a lot about trauma informed practice, that is important. We talk a lot about resilience, that is important. What's the next step after that? Right? How do we also explicitly teach healing? What's the work of becoming stronger after you've been hurt look like, and creating healthy environments that do not continue to traumatize? All right, so the big piece here is that genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. So if we focus only on the choices that individuals make, we have a limited focus. And this might not be you. Maybe it's you sometimes, but there may be people in your building or people that you work with, right? Or people that you have to see on a daily basis who think this student or this person is not doing what they need to do. And if they just fixed their problem, they would no longer be a problem or no longer have problems. And I'm not here to say that we should never focus on the individual and the choices that they make. Again, it's the individual and the environment. If we really, really want to be effective, though, we have to do it in context and we have to have a comprehensive focus. All right. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and throw them in the chat. Dr. Sean Genwright, I'm typing it in the chat for you. All right. He has this most recent book is called Four Pivots, and his work is on healing centered engagement. So it's all in the chat for those that want it. So let's go back to our mentee real quick. Drop a word in the chat that describes how you're thinking or feeling right now. What are you thinking, feeling, or what type of sensation are you experiencing in your body? Thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations. Throw a word in the chat to represent whatever's going on with you right now. Inspired. Cool. All right. Anyone else? If y'all got anything else, feel free to drop it in the chat. I love when I'm on brand. Okay, inspired, committed, excellent. I hope I had something to do with it. I hope you came on the call already feeling inspired. I helped you feel more inspired. All right, reflective, positive, overwhelmed. Okay, thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. All right. So describe the qualities or life outcomes of a K through 12 student who is thriving 15 years into adulthood. So think about where people are around age 33. What are the qualities or life outcomes of someone who is a student today that you expect them to have when they're around 33 if they are thriving? Sad about things in the news. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Optimistic. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you all for sharing. All right. Driven, positive. What else are y'all thinking about? Satisfied. Yeah. You do want people to be satisfied with their life. Absolutely. Problem solver and employed. Absolutely. Thank you. Independent. Okay. Confident. All right. Self-sufficient. Financially stable. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stable. And for those of you who might be confused, like, where is he? Like, some people are putting stuff in the chat. So, healthy relationships. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. All right. So, financial resource to do what they want in life. Beautiful. Absolutely. I like the way you put that. All right. Sometimes in the helping profession, we downplay or we don't prioritize the importance that finances have, and access to resources have, because we absolutely need those things. They are not everything. Money is not the most important thing. Most of the time, there may be some times where money is pretty darn important, but you need to have enough to be stable. Stability creates opportunities for you to do what you need to do and do what you want to do. All right. Connect to a community for support. Absolutely. And the other piece that's super important about finances is, what do Black boys often care about? From the age of about 9 to probably at least your mid-20s. Sneakers. Yep, absolutely. They care about things that cost money. They are not unique in that aspect. But I will say that Black boys, our script tells us that we are supposed to be able to take care of a family. It tells us lots of other things, but as a man, you are supposed to be able to take care of family. And you're also taught, a lot of times you receive implicit messages about needing to have the nicest sneakers or kicks. Y'all call them kicks up there. Yeah. But yeah, you got your shoe game is supposed to be nice. Your clothes are supposed to be nice. You're supposed to be able to pay if y'all go out on a date. You're supposed to be able to buy nice things. You're supposed to be able to have a nice car. If you go on YouTube, or if you go on TikTok, or if you go on Twitch, all of these different places where young men hang out online, they are flaunting wealth. If you talk about hip hop, if you talk about the entertainment industry, movies, there's this idea that you are supposed to have money. And if we can't communicate in a way that they find meaningful, why it's important to have balance, why money is not the most important thing, why you shouldn't be chasing money to the detriment of your own personal well-being and the important relationships in your life, why you should have respect for other people even as you pursue things that are important to you. then we're going to lose them before we even have a chance to get them. We have to be able to compete with people who are talking straight about money. All right. So yeah, we need to be able to have conversations about finance. So let's get back on track a little bit. I want us to play a little game called Where's the Lie? All right. So we got three options. Which of these do you all think is the lie? One, it takes nearly 20 years and nearly nothing going wrong to escape poverty. I said one. B, those with six or more aces live on average almost 20 years less than those with none. C, in schools where parents have more degrees, there are similar achievement gaps between black and white students. Or D, white Americans live about 5 years longer than black Americans, mostly due to socioeconomic factors. Which one do we think is not true? Which one do we think is a lie? A, B, C, or D? I'm gonna give y'all about 10 seconds to respond. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, y'all, the correct answer is C, right? So, in schools where parents have more degrees, there are smaller achievement gaps between black and white students. So, in actuality, many of you did select C. Good job. Shout out to y'all. So, what happens there is that where do y'all think schools where there is actually let's get into that. Let's just roll right into that. Let's break down why that might be the case. So the question is basically saying where there's higher degree attainment, there are smaller gaps between black and white students. Well, there was a large study and they explored student achievement gaps in school districts across the United States. And what they found is that household adult education attainment was the most significant contributor to achievement gaps. So the more education in a community, the higher the achievement gaps. And they said that it was like that because with higher levels of adult education, there were larger achievement gaps because higher resource communities may create additional barriers for minority students. So if you think of where the best schools are, quote unquote best schools, they're typically in the most affluent areas. And we're talking about the racial makeup and the internalized beliefs and biases about those communities. Those things work together in a way that often works against the black students in those communities. So the gaps between the students are wider as a result of that. Because a lot of times you have a fly in the milk scenario going on where there is one or a small group of black kids that typically stand out like a sore thumb, and they have to navigate certain things that people in that space are often unequipped to support them with. All right, so again, we're talking about pathways, exploring pathways, endangerments, and identities. One thing that creates that complexity is that things that are supposed to be quote unquote the best may not be if you are black, if you are a black boy. All right. The other piece is the teacher makeup, right? A lot of times those teachers don't look like them either, and they don't understand them, and they often have negative biases that they've internalized about those students. And so when there are opportunities to support, they might sometimes create a challenge or create a punishment. So there's also research by MIT economist Peter Timmon that talks about escaping poverty requiring almost 20 years with almost nothing going wrong. So not only is it difficult if you make it out of poverty, depending on what school you are and the degree to which you are involved in a racial makeup and the biases that community holds and the systemic discrimination, the policies, practices, and procedures, how those things work together to shape outcomes. Not only is there complexity there, but if you are in poverty and trying to get to a space like that, because you've been told that that the white man's ice is colder, as Malcolm X might say, then there are lots of things that have to go absolutely right for you just to get a chance. And the crazy thing is that historically, there are things that people have had to navigate that were kind of um just really experienced primarily by black and brown people. And now more and more people, no matter how they show up, more and more white people and more people who are from more historically privileged groups are now experiencing some of those struggles when it comes to economics. All right. So the world is becoming more complex for more people. And part of what we're seeing now is that there are folks who are taking advantage of the pain that folks are experiencing and they're focusing on that pain instead of on folks who are responsible, who have power, who are making decisions that are negatively impacting all of us. They're telling folks that you need to blame that black and brown person in your neighborhood that has no power, that has very little power relative to folks who are making big decisions. All right. So let's go to round two, right? So that's let's go to round two real quick. That's round one. Let's go to round two. Let's get a better understanding of how all of these things are working together to lead to these outcomes that we're having. All right. So some of y'all already started round two. That's fine. Some of y'all already started round two. All right. So where's the lie? Is it A, white boys who grow up rich are likely to remain that way? Black boys raised at the top, however, are more likely to become poor than stay wealthy. Is it B, black students at HBCUs are just as likely to be impacted by stereotype threat as black students at PWIs? Is it C, black boys as young as age 10 are viewed as older and less innocent than white boys of the same age? Or is it D, sons of black families making $500,000 or more were about as likely to be incarcerated as the sons of white families earning $36,000? All right, which one do we think it is? A, B, C, or D? I'm going to give you all about 10 seconds to answer. 10. I'm sorry. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, so the correct answer is B. B is the lie. So black students at HBCUs are less likely to be impacted by stereotype than black students at PWIs. This speaks to the importance of environment. And for those that don't know, stereotype threat, lots of research on it. Claude Steele, I'm going to type his name in the chat. But basically, the research suggests that when people are concerned about confirming a negative stereotype about their group, they they underperform because they're stressed about that, and mental energy that they will use to focus on the task at hand is being taken away because they're worried about not being too dangerous, or if we're in a math class, not being too dumb. And they've done this with multiple groups of people, where they had a study where they simply asked about gender. They asked Asian girls about their gender before they took tests and after, because a stereotype about Asian people is that they're smart, and a stereotype about women is that they're not good at math. There was a marked difference between the performance for the group of students who were asked about their gender before the test versus after the test. All right. So what this study suggests, or what this particular study suggests, is that if you are in an environment where you are not concerned about conforming negative stereotypes, you are more likely to perform better, period. And so at HBCUs, typically that's the case, right? You're less likely to be worried about how are people going to perceive me. And so I thought that study was super interesting. But that we're gonna talk in we're gonna talk about a couple more things, and then I'm gonna share about what I'm doing in my program. So we gotta obviously talk about implicit bias and structural racism directly. And this quote talks about bias as being a thumbprint, right, of the culture on our minds. And so human beings have the ability to learn to associate two things together very quickly. That's innate. You learn to associate dog or puppy with cute very quickly, or spider with nasty or dangerous very quickly. But what we teach ourselves, what we choose to associate is up to us. All right. So we can intentionally understand that, okay, maybe all spiders are not bad because some spiders kill mosquitoes, right? So that's good. I don't like flies. Spiders take care of flies. So maybe they're not bad every time. And then maybe all puppies are not good. Like some puppies, like German shepherds who are foaming at the mouth, that's not cute. That's not safe, right? So we learn how to navigate things based on our beliefs, but we make associations with things very quickly all the time. So we have a quick acting brain and we have a slower acting brain, a more deliberate acting brain that helps us understand how we need to navigate with the world. So what does it have to do with structural racism? Well, first of all, we often look at our outcomes as as the cause, right? But really, the outcomes are a result of history, policies, and practices. So, what laws in place and how are they enforced? And then those laws and policies and experiences are shaped by associations and assumptions, right? And so, what I want to do real quick, um, when I count to three, I want you all to type in the chat what color you see. When I count to three, I want you all to type in the chat what color you see. One, two, three. What color do you all see? Black and blue, black and blue, blue, blue. All right, cool. Everybody's seeing black and blue. Except one weird person who sees gold and white. Up two. Now we got three people. Weird folks. Y'all weirdos seeing weird and white out here. What is going on? Four. Okay. So y'all aren't weird, obviously, but we're looking at the same thing. How often do we experience this in life where we're having a conversation and people are seeing different things, even though we're looking at the same thing? We have a bias where we assume that everyone sees the world as we do, but in reality, that's not the case. Now, put a one in the chat. Put a one in the chat if you saw what this is saying. Read this and put a one in the chat. If you see, if you missed it, put a zero. If you didn't catch it, put a zero. If you caught it, put a one. Zero, one. All right, somebody caught it. All right, one. All right, okay, cool. All right. So now you see it. Now you see it. All right, but you didn't see it at first. All right. So we have been taught to move in a certain way. And also our brains work in a way where we conserve energy. So a lot of times we look for pattern recognition. We compare present experiences to past experiences. And so we move on expectations all the time. And so we read, just like we read sentences, we read people as well. And so sometimes when there is something we don't expect, we miss it. And it shapes the way we interact with people. All right. And this last one is the story absolutely matters. And so this is Cecil Johnson. In history, you probably didn't hear about this young man, but there are all types of people who resisted outside of just Martin Luther King. And so it's important for us to tell those stories because we assume things if we don't have facts, if we don't have stories to back up what we're saying. All right. So real quick, this is a two-strike study that speaks to teachers who were experiencing behaviors. At least they read about behaviors that students were showing. All the students were showing the same behaviors that they read about, and the teacher responded with what they would do on the first infraction versus the second infraction. And they said that they would feel troubled. They also talked about how troubled they would feel on the first infraction versus the second infraction, and whether or not they would give a disciplinary action. And so what they learned in the study is that they felt like all of the different profiles had different names. Some of the names were like Joshua or Dylan. Some of the names were like Tyreek or Jamal. And so when the teacher thought the student was black, they felt more trouble the second interaction, right? The second time the student did the thing, they felt more trouble compared to when they thought the student was white. And when they decided to take disciplinary action, they were more likely to take disciplinary action on the first infraction, and even more so on the second infraction. So Black boys often do not have a second chance or a fair first chance either. So for anyone that's like, this stuff doesn't exist, that's back in the day, like implicit biases in a thing, biases aren't real, systemic racism isn't real. There's more than enough data to show that it is. It absolutely is. And it absolutely does impact the way that we interact with folks. So what do we do with that? All right. Well, first of all, we have to advocate at different levels. There are currently multiple states that don't even require a school counselor. All right, at any grade level. Right. The states that you see highlighted do not require school counselors in K through 12. So we have to make sure that we're advocating at different policies. Are you in the building, and is your ratio where it needs to be? And if it's not, who do you need to talk to get those conversations going? So there are also a significant amount of schools that have more cops than counselors. And black and brown schools are more likely to have police. And if they're high poverty as well. So we need to be able to navigate those conversations too. Because in place of a cop, like, yes, safety matters, but oftentimes we get punishment when we should get patience, right? When we should get help, we get harmed, right? So it's important for us to be able to navigate the importance of these conversations. So this is from School Counseling and Closed Opportunity Gaps. We have to think of things outside of our school building, because the reality is that students build in things from they bring in things from their ecosystem into our school communities. So we have to understand what's going on outside of our communities. I'm sorry, outside of our school buildings and our communities. And we have to actively work to change those things. And here are a few things. This is all provided in the PowerPoint. And I'm going to thread it through my case study about what I'm doing in my building real quick. But these are things that will help us address stuff that's going on in the building and outside of it. All right. So, uh, real quick, I went from tired to inspired around the time that COVID was going on. There was a lot going on. My wife was pregnant with our first son, and I got in trouble because I was advocating a way that people in my district, who I report to, did not like. And so when it was time to come back in the building, I was like, do I really want to do this? I didn't like counseling virtually, and I didn't like what was going on. And so I had to connect with something that was meaningful for me. For us, was the Black History Quiz Bowl. And so we created a team. This was also around the time where you had these divisive concept laws. And in Georgia, they actually made it against the law to talk about important issues like ethnicity and like historical examples of systemic racism and how people overcame them. So we made it to the Elite Eight, our first round of competition. This connected with me and inspired me because when I was younger, I was a Black history nerd. I was a quiz ball nerd. And so after that, students were like, hey, we want to do more stuff. So we decided to create a wax museum, a living wax museum. It was student led. Students did the research. They created the posters. We supported them. They dressed up, and it was a school wide event. Everyone attended the Living Wax Museum. In the fall, Hispanic Heritage rolled around. These students said, hey, can we do the same thing for Hispanic Heritage Month? I was like, nah, I'm busy. But then we talked about it and we are like, how can we not? And so we were like, okay, cool, let's do it again. And from all of these events where we were centering student voice and we were focusing on what they valued and focusing on the power of culture. And we use that to leverage relationships with our students, and we pulled from those students. We pulled a leadership team from those students, and they helped us improve school climate and helped us just get things done that we needed to get done throughout the year. So that inspired me. So at the beginning of the following school year 2022, I'm in the first semester of school year 2022, we had 187 out of 944 referrals that were for physical aggression. All right. So almost 20% of our referrals were for physical aggression. And most of those referrals, almost half of those referrals that went for physical aggression, which is fighting or almost fighting, went to Black boys. And so we had to come up with a solution. We had lots of conversations. People were still dealing with COVID. They they uh they they missed out on learning loss, not just academic, but also social and emotional learning loss. They also were dealing with stressors. So we had conversations. We heard from all these folks, and we talked about what would be a helpful intervention. And so we applied the intervention. I'm going to talk about what that was in a second. But as you can see, we had physical aggression referrals. 93 in the 93 of the 187 were to black boys in fall of 2021. And about black boys made up 27.6% of our population. We're a majority black and brown school, but they accounted for almost 50% of the physical aggression referrals. And so at the end of the second semester, we did a small group. We focused on social emotional skills. We identified standards that we wanted to address. We created a pre-post test. We delivered a evidence-based intervention with those students. And as you can see, there was a decrease from first semester to second semester for all of the boys, but especially for the boys that were in the group. They had 20 physical aggression referrals in the first semester, and they only had one as a group. They only had one the second semester. All right. That was in part because of the work that we did. So we let the data lead us. 7 of those 9 group members were black. Part of supporting black boys is making sure that they have access to important and essential skills that may not have otherwise been taught to them, and that they have access to restorative processes that help them heal and learn, not just get punished. All right, so we had a 62% decrease in physical aggression referrals for our students overall because of our equitable program. Now we had tiered interventions. We had tier 1 stuff in place. We had no referral celebrations where we celebrated every single student that didn't get a referral at the first 4.5 weeks, and then every quarter after that. I had students come up to me and say, "I've never been rewarded for anything before," because they made it to that first 4.5. They may not have made it to the to the first quarter, but they made it to the first 4.5 weeks. All right, so we celebrated them in tier 1. We had other classroom lessons and things that we did in tier 1. In tier 2, we had targeted. We had a targeted challenge survey to identify students who had needs and get an idea from them about what challenges they were experiencing. And then we also had a small group curriculum that focused on what the data told us they needed, that they said they needed help with. So self-control, effective coping skills, discipline, communication strategies, and conflict resolution. We also collaborated with teachers, and we had consultational meetings to make sure that the other part of tier 2, which is what adults are doing, and the indirect interactions with students, were on point too. And then in tier 3, we had data-driven individual student support. So when students needed additional support, they had a safe space to come to me, especially those black boys. And so it wasn't just me, it was our counseling team, and it was the training and development that we had over the years. All right, so I presented data to staff to close opportunity gaps beyond what was just going on in our building. I collaborated with my colleague Jennifer Susko and other counselors. We went to school board meetings. We started a group to help address racism throughout our district and what was going on in the classroom and in our community called Stronger Together. I was speaking in front of people, bringing light to important information. I was being highlighted for the work that we were doing, and I was even out there trying to get people elected that would better serve our community. All right. So, last thing, we want to execute action plans to close opportunity gaps at the end of the day. You have ecological pathways where people are, and the goal is for them to get where they are to where they want to be. They have endangerments along the pathway. Our goal is to identify gaps between where they are and where they want to be. And we want to close those gaps with a comprehensive program that includes the way that students show up, grow up, glow up, and sew up. And so we want to use, not that. We want to use our closing the gap action plans to help us do that. And there are links provided in this that will help you be able to do the work that you did, do the work that I did in your way, right? This isn't something that only I can do or that only some school counselor can do. You've been uniquely trained to do this work. And ASCA provides a ton of documents to help you consistently meet the needs of your students. And the only thing is that these are tools. So if you don't have the awareness, knowledge, and skills to understand the ecological experiences that Black boys are facing, then you can't make sure that your tool is aligned with what you need to do to help the Black boys in your school. So all of this together will help you support the Black boys in your community. You need to understand the problems they're facing. We need to make sure that we're acknowledging it. We're providing space for them to heal, for them to talk about what they're going through, and we're encouraging them to do it. They're not getting punished for opening up, right? So, y'all, I appreciate the opportunity. And I hope that you all found this valuable. If you all need to get in contact with me for any reason, like I said, those are linked. But my contact information is, oh, I'll put it in the slides, and I'll make sure that you all have access to the slides. But yeah, thank you all again for the opportunity, and I hope that you all have a great night.
Can you go back to the slide with the evaluation?
That's a different evaluation. But hey, sure, why not? Have at it. Have at it. One of the things I do, I don't know if you all have ever heard of hatching results, but I am a lead professional learning specialist with hatching results. And so we have the National School Counseling Leadership Conference coming up in San Diego in a couple weeks. And we also had Advancing Equity virtual conference a couple weeks ago. So that's where I initially delivered this information. Um, so I'm glad that you all found it valuable. Again, I'm going to put my information in the chat just in case. Um, feel free to reach out. I appreciate the opportunity again, and I hope you all have a great night. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, John.
Is Michael
Um,
on here too? Tell Michael I say appreciate it as well.
okay. Yeah, so we'll share the PowerPoint, contact information, the chats, and a link to the recording tomorrow. And I will give the people who attended a certificate of attendance tomorrow. Any final questions for Mr. John? Sorry, John. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. Thank you, John.